All right. Um, I am looking forward to all of you getting to know the first these people because they are some of the real rising stars in our church, and they came out of all out of Walla Walla. Is that right, Sean?
Yep.
And I saw four names there, but I only met three of you at General Conference. And yeah, I was just like, wow, these are the seeking what they sought guys, because I've had so many people who say, oh, I love that podcast. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Well,
Let
Lauren,
me let me
if
just ask the two of you who are here to give us a little introduction to yourself, if you don't mind, Anthony. I'll start
yeah,
with you.
for sure. And Lauren, I mean, you're saying you were surprised to see us. I think when we at GC we saw you out of the corner of our eye, we're like, that's the legendary Lauren Siebold. So we were a little starstruck ourselves. So um well, greetings, everyone. Great to meet you. Great to connect. My name's Anthony Lyder. I'm a pastor down in Texas Conference. I'm the pastor for Young Adult Ministry at the Keene Church, right across the street from Southwestern Adventist University. So we are the Southwestern Adventist University Church, and I get to be the pastor for Young Adult Ministry. So I get to hang out with a lot of college students and go on trips and preach every week, and it's a fun time. So that's me. I'll pass it over to
Uh,
Sean.
Sean, yeah, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. So you can see I'm outside right now. Normally, I'd like to have a little bit nicer setup like Anthony does. Hopefully, my audio is coming through clear enough and the reception's good enough that my picture quality is okay for you to
Yeah,
make
yeah,
me
you're
out.
you're you're looking fine. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we're at the beach today. So that's actually, I'm in Southern California. We don't actually own any churches as Adventists in Southern California. We just go to the beach every Sabbath. So that's what we do. No, we're doing a special annual beach trip here with my local church. So we're out here today enjoying nature. But yeah, so in SoCal, so I'm actually in San Gabriel, California, and I teach junior high and actually grades fifth through eighth. Bible, history, have done some PE as well. If any of you have been Adventist educators, you know that you wear many hats. So I've done many other things as well. So I'm going into my 11th year. I have to report on Monday. So we're starting our new school year very soon. And I've loved being a teacher, being a part of Adventist education. And yeah, just excited to be here.
Well, Sean, I'll go ahead and start with you then. The title, Seeking What They Sought. I'm going to lay that one on you. How
Sure.
did you come up with that title, and what does it mean? Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so there's a team of four. I know that you met three of us, Lauren, at the GC. It's me, Anthony, and then Jesse Churchill, who is the pastor at Anthem, which is the contemporary worship service at Loma Linda University Church. So that's Jesse. And then the fourth one is Erik. You don't necessarily see him quite as much on video because he's our producer, but he does also come on the show and hang out with us for some recordings. And he's the one that makes all the artwork. So if you go on our social media pages, or even when you go to the podcast, if you see artwork or anything that's been published, he's the one that does all the artwork and the aesthetic for the podcast. So
Yeah,
um,
Ellen White
that's
with
our
Ellen White with earphones on. I love that.
That's right. He's done all the graphic. He's an
That's Eric.
amazing graphic artist, graphic designer. He does all the things. So our stickers and different merchandise that we make, he's the one that does all of that. So he's the brains behind our podcast. Um, so going back to that though, the actual saying is a Japanese proverb. So the four of us have been friends. Jesse, Erik, Anthony, and we've been friends since high school, and even sometimes a little bit before that. Anthony, we met before that because our dads were pastors in the Washington Conference. So we kind of knew of each other, but really became friends in high school. So the four of us have been close friends. And we started the podcast just as a response to our already deep conversations we were having as friends. We call each other up on the phone, respond to things that were happening within the Adventist church, have theological debates, just have deep conversation. And just one day we decided in 2018, kind of summer 2018, we're like, we should start a podcast. Let's see if others want to join in on these conversations and just hear in. And that's how it started. So when we thought about a name, it was actually Jesse that came up with a saying or looked up a proverb. It's actually a Japanese proverb that says, "Do not follow in the footsteps of the wise, seek what they sought." And so that's actually by a Japanese, I guess, what I don't know what you call him, Anthony, but just like a
Like a poet,
poet,
philosopher. Yeah.
Matsuo Basho. And so again, yeah, it's do not follow in the footsteps of the wise, seek what they sought. And so we came up with the name "Seeking What They Sought" out of a response to that. Like as we discussed as a group, that's the spirit that we wanted to focus on when it came to our church. So when we look back on our founders, when we look back on this movement of Adventism, it's not necessarily always the best practice to just do or emulate what has been done in the past, but to look at the spirit behind it. So when we look at Ellen White or Joseph Bates or James or others, we look at the spirit behind the movement and we deeply resonate with that church movement that took place and is still taking place. And we desire to follow after that spirit and seek after that passion to know the Bible, know God's word, and follow his spirit. And so that's the spirit behind the name.
So you're very intentionally biblical in all of your podcasts and your questions, your analysis.
The goal is to always stick to the, like when it comes to Adventism, of course, that's our context. That's what we grew up in and what we still subscribe to. We want to look at everything we believe and what we practice and experience both in beliefs and culture, and say what is biblical, what is really going after the heart of God, and continue to pursue that, and not to pursue the things that may be distractions. And we've all found different distractions in our life that have distracted us from God. And so that's our heart, that's our pursuit. And Anthony, I don't know if you want to add anything else beyond that.
Well, Anthony, let me lay this on you then, since we've got an explanation of the title, but I was particularly interested in something that you wrote in your description. You said uh, the the context of the podcast was the biblical basis for the beliefs and culture of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It was that word culture that grabbed me because I've always felt for myself that I'm not, and I've mentioned this to my class before, I'm not as interested in the details of theology as I'm interested in how people receive them and how they process them and what they do with them, how they do faith, if you will.
Mhm.
And that word culture grabbed me there. Uh, can you unpack that a little bit?
For sure. I think at the time, as Sean said, like we were having so many conversations around, 20, kind of in the years after we had passed, we had finished undergrad. We finished in 2015, and like it had been a few years, and we realized that we were holding our Adventism a little bit differently than we had when we were students in college. And um, it seemed as though like Sean had I had gotten like maybe a little bit more left. Sean had gotten a little more right, it seemed. Jesse was somewhere in the weird middle. And it's weird when you grow up with all your friends, with the buddies, and you all kind of agree on things when you're younger, and then you get older and you start to have disagreements. And so we were disagreeing about things that we had never disagreed about before. And some of those things were theological, but some of those things were also cultural. And so I think that was a lot of the heart behind when we originally made that statement was, okay, let's, the founders were people of the book. They wanted to search the scriptures like the Bereans to see, man, what does the scripture have to say? They chased after the text. And we wanted to be like that. We all studied religion at Walwell University, and we wanted to be like that. Like, man, what does the Bible have to say? Because it seemed as though I think for us growing up so many times in church, there were things that were either cultural or traditions, but they weren't, when we went to the Bible, they weren't actually biblical things. And so they were very culturally important, and maybe they were traditionally important for in the tradition, so to speak, of Adventism, but they weren't biblical per se. And so I think we were wrestling with that. So there's a lot of words to say that's where that's what was where that came from and how that was birthed.
No, that's a good answer. I was just thinking this morning that we have a fairly sophisticated, we have in Christianity a fairly sophisticated understanding or a hermeneutic to interpret scripture. And Adventists will grab onto that sophisticated hermeneutic when we need to. But we also have some distinctive carve-outs where we say, okay, but when it comes to this passage, we've got to stick to what the pioneers did. When it comes to this practice in the church, let's say some of the traditional things like appearance and food, we've got to stick to what the pioneers did. We're gonna carve that out. We're not going to use the more sophisticated hermeneutic. We're going to use a rather unsophisticated hermeneutic of Ellen White, and enforce that. So it's kind of an interesting situation. Sean, do you want to get on in this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many complexities to why we have different, whether we would classify it as cultural or biblical. There's kind of sometimes a surprising blurring of that line. We sometimes separate the two of the way we culturally experience things versus what we actually believe as hard doctrine. A lot of times those things are a bit mixed more than we recognize. And I found it to be that the best practice is to continue having conversations with people that may not see things the same way you do, because they came from a background that maybe you didn't necessarily come from. So there's things that I can look at and laugh. I mean, we joked as coming from Walla Walla, and I've got friends and people I deeply care about that went to Southern, and there was kind of a fun, light-spirited rivalry between Walla Walla University and Southern. Nothing overly serious, but we would poke fun at each other, and I still poke fun at my friends and colleagues that went to Southern. Like, I'm so sorry you guys didn't get to experience the joy of mustard on your hot dogs until you were able to graduate after you left there, sprinkling some pepper on your pasta, right? And we sometimes poke fun and have lighthearted discussions about that. But there's people, and again, there's experiences where some of those are actually heavy conversations when it comes to diet and health. I was just looking at a clip that Mark Finley put out, that he was really pushing hard on the idea of reclaiming Adventist identity and how we've slipped away from our health message and diet. And as I was watching, I was like, I understand the desire to hold on to our tenets or the things that we value deeply, but also a lot of times the way we present it is in a way where it comes across as this just very heavy, very shame-driven experience. And I don't even know if it's necessarily the intention of people like Mark Philly and others that are using rhetoric that feels that way to someone like me. But I noticed that that's been the experience for many, that when you talk about diet or you talk about spirit of prophecy or talk about investigative judgment, there's just a heaviness to those conversations where I feel that not that we don't want to take those things seriously, but we've got to learn to lighten up and have conversations in a good faith way with those that are conservative, liberal, agree, disagree, and allow us to find common ground and move forward together and understand the history of why things matter to us. And we haven't always done a good job with that.
Yeah, I have said, Sean and Anthony, that we've not been very good at implementing the notion of a broad church that allows people with different ways. We don't know how to do that. One of the My wife and I watch over the social media for Adventists today, and one of the things that we encounter a lot is people saying, "Well, if you think that, you should not even be an Adventist. You will not be in the kingdom." Like you said, Sean, there's a real heaviness to that, and this concept of identity. Uh, Anthony, you probably can talk a little bit about that too. Identity is huge. I mean, when Bjorn and I were at the General Conference, we often said this is an exercise in identity. From the first reading of fundamentalist belief about Ellen White to the last ringing notes of "We Have This Hope," it was about identity. Anthony, go ahead.
Absolutely. I think identity has been so important, I think, since the beginning of the Adventist story, and it remains today. I think you're totally right about GC in that way. Like so many of the the cultural trappings, the things that we do from, Sean and Jesse and I were walking around asking people in the exhibition hall about their haystacks toppings. What's your haystacks order? And it was interesting all around the world, from people from Eastern Europe to South America, people know about haystacks, and it's really interesting how that has kind of spread. Something so silly, like haystacks has spread, but uh, you know, yeah, identity I think is such a core part of being Adventist, and it's maybe why some of these conversations can tend to feel so charged at times, because people feel like the stakes are so high. They feel like, oh, well, if you go too far to the left, too far to the right, oh, you're you're losing that core thing, that core whatever it is, identity. And I think our practice has always been to try and have conversations all across the aisle, just to sort of or maybe I'll phrase it this way. I think what we've learned over time is that the Adventist identity is maybe broader than certain voices try and make it seem, that the table's
That's right.
perhaps bigger than we ever thought that it was. And I think growing up, I think the four of us felt that it was very narrow and very small. And I think over time we've learned from conversations that, oh, people hold their Adventism very differently, but they're still just as Adventist as this other person over here might be. Um, so yeah, I think that's one of the lessons we've learned.
I will reveal a little bit of a secret here that Bjorn and I have talked about many times. Both of us, uh, since we're both representing Adventists today, and this happened a lot at the GC, people will come up to us who work for the church, sometimes in Silver Spring or one of the division offices or conferences and unions. They'll come up to us and say, just quietly, thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do. We appreciate that you're expanding those edges. Don't always agree with you, but I really appreciate that you're pushing that envelope.
Mm.
See,
Uh,
Lauren, you notice I didn't want to totally interrupt, but I didn't want to forget this point. What you just said there is something we've heard so many times. Both we've had, high level people within the church email us, send us messages, text messages, phone calls, countless throughout the years since we started in 2018. Similar as you just described. And that's part to us, that's part of the problem is it has to be done quietly.
mhm.
Why does it have to be done quiet? That honestly bothers me more than some sort of theological issue. I think the culture, this is where I mentioned before that culture and theology, they kind of blend. It's like if we have produced through our theology a culture where we can't, don't ask, don't tell, or do it through the Adventist grapevine, or do it, behind closed doors. Something about that spirit concerns me more deeply than a movement to be more liberal or more conservative, whatever, irks us. I have no problem. This sounds crazy. I don't have a problem if someone wants to, come up to me and say, "Oh, I'm anti-Trinitarian." It's like, hey, thanks for being honest about that. Let's have a conversation about why
Yeah.
you believe that way. Tell me the hermeneutics that inform that theology, and I want to have a discussion with you. Let's sit down in church together. Let's worship. Let's go down. Let's go to potluck together. Or if it's the opposite end, we've spoken to, people on the fringes on both sides, conservative and liberal. And there's always something beautiful to be found in that good faith conversation. But I just wanted to stop there as you mentioned that that can't, in my opinion, that can't continue. I know that especially as Adventist employees, we feel like Anthony said, the stakes are high. But something that we believe in as we've done this more and more years is that needs to stop. That we need to be able to have the conversation. So as long as we're allowed to do that, we're going to continue to do that.
Sean, I literally had one guy come up to me and stand next to me and talk to me from behind his hand.
Mm.
I was
Wow.
I appreciated it, but it was kind of interesting. Another guy from a highly placed in the church came up to me and just said thank you and slipped his card in my, I didn't even know who he was at the time,
Mm.
slipped his card in my coat pocket. Bjorn, join me in the conversation here.
Yeah, I was really interested by the identity. Well, yeah, looking at Adventist identity and also kind of expanding how we see that. Did you guys? Well, let me ask Anthony. Did you feel anything shifted at the last session at GC session? Because it seemed as though Kohler was at least trying to expand the Adventist conversation a little bit. So it wasn't just by kind of very narrowly defined like this is this is kind of the approved group and these are the not so approved groups to talk to. It was more, we're one big family. We're not perfect. We're going to work this out. That seemed to be the new message, rather than, these are, literally these are approved, and these people are not Adventists. Don't speak to them. Did you see that shift, or was I just kind of imagining it?
Yeah, I did see that shift a little, and I think that I'm extremely curious to see more from Kohler for sure. I think the tonal shift, I think, was very real, because it seemed as if previous leadership, as you said, spent considerable time on defining what is and is not an Adventist, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think it seemed that as though from Kohler's, at least his opening statements, he talked about wanting to listen to diverse perspectives. He talked about wanting to, as long as our conversations are based in the Bible, he's open to talk to anyone, and he wants to surround himself with a diverse collection of people with open minds. That was really surprising and encouraging to me. I was really encouraged by that. So yeah, I think so. I think it seems like a shift, and I'm excited to see more.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I was surprised in the same way. I wasn't necessarily expecting him to go that direction. And so that was a happy, that was kind of a happy turn of events. So kind of piggybacking on that, what do you guys, or I mean, do you guys have plans to sort of embrace the greater sort of global Adventist landscape? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you see as your typical kind of listenership, but are you planning on, I don't know, doing in-person events elsewhere in the world? I don't know if you already do, but do tours South America, Europe, Africa, to kind of connect with other parts of Adventism. It's just fascinating how fast Adventism is growing, and not just growing, how they're leading the conversation from other parts of the world. I mean, I don't know if you walked around the exhibition hall, but I think I mentioned this a number of times on ATSS, but the South Americans were light years ahead of everybody else when it came to media, when it came to technology, just expertise. I mean, they were really, really impressively on top of things. And I don't know, it pays to be in contact with other parts of the Adventist world.
Yeah. I mean, I just found, or I was last week just having a conversation with a pastor who is over in the States now, but was over in Brazil, and just describing to me, his experience over there, what Adventism is like over there versus here, beyond just the cultural aspect, but just practice. How are they doing evangelism? How are they, what are they focusing on? How do they reach others? Why is it growing so quickly versus here? And there's a lot of nuance. I think we all have certain assumptions about why that is, why the West, whether it's parts of Europe or United States, why Adventist membership growth is more stagnant versus other places. There's some quick and easy answers to that, but I think there's also some nuance just talking to those from those spaces about what is working and what is it. It's not just about numbers. One of the questions I asked them is, do you actually see effective evangelism happening? It's not just the results of baptism that we're looking for. We're looking at long-term spiritual growth, and what kind of, I hate to put it this way, but what kind of product are we producing from our evangelism? And what I mean by that is, for many years, I know Anthony and I remember the primary way to reach others, and still is around, is Daniel and Revelation seminars. And the type of people we're bringing in, or the type of spirit we're bringing people into the church, what are we producing? What kind of members are we producing in terms of what matters, what it means to be a part of this church, what it means to be a body of believers? And, so it's not just about the numbers. So that was an interesting conversation I had, that is pretty nuanced, where there is something we can learn from those that are growing quickly, but also what is it that they're producing? So I think, to answer your question, we're very interested in having global conversations. We've had a few. Part of it, frankly, is just, again, this isn't Anthony and our jobs. This is more of a hobby, to be quite honest. We do this podcast on the side, and when we have time to do so. So sometimes actually planning for bigger picture meetings and stuff like that, in person, and touring or stuff like that, that would sometimes require a bit more commitment than we have time for. At least the way that we're set up right now.
We're pastors and teachers, and I'm sure some of y'all in this room have been pastors and teachers, so you know that you get home at 9 p.m. and you're like, okay, it's time for bed.
So maybe here's the real question: when's it going to be the full on gig?
Oh, wow.
Uh-huh.
What a question. I think that maybe one honest answer to that is when we did the Ted Wilson episode, that was definitely, I think, a turning point for us and like our audience growth and reach and just the amount of people that knew who we were. And, we went from recording episodes that we thought only our moms were listening to like people in the grocery store recognized me by my voice. Sean and Jesse would meet people in Loma Linda on the side of the road that'd be like, "Are you seeking with?" And we'd be like, so it definitely kind of took off in a big way that we didn't anticipate and or plan for. And so I think we're definitely open to it, but I think we're still figuring out how to manage this current level of audience. So that's the honest answer.
So no, thank you for taking the question seriously. I appreciate it. So how did you actually get that interview, and was it weird? Like, how'd it go? I'm talking about the Ted Wilson one.
That's a great question. Sean can probably tell the story a little more from. Sean, I'll let you handle that one.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to describe because for the most part, our guests, we are. Maybe you already know this because when you listen to us, we're not overly formal. Like if you listen into Seeking What They Saw, it's very different if you pulled up a production by 3ABN or something. We're not wearing the nicest clothes or scripted in any, like there's very little scripting. We do have notes that we send to a guest that we have on, but it's usually quite limited, and we try to encourage organic conversation. Usually the way that we describe it to people is if we were going to sit down for a nice meal and just talk meaningfully, that's what we would like to see happen. And so there's kind of a balance in that way where we do give a direction for the conversation, but also leave it pretty organic. With Ted Wilson, I contacted the GC. I contacted his secretary, and the strange thing about it was it came across to me as I went through that process that they had never been asked to do anything like that before, at least at the time when I did it back in, I guess that was 2023 that I asked. And they said, sounds great, just send us a formal email with your request and what your organization is, and we'll get back to you. So I sent them an email giving them some examples of our work and that we'd like to have Ted Wilson on. And so there was actually no friction. In fact, a few days later, they had emailed back saying, okay, we'll plan it and we'll do it.
Luckily, we had just interviewed Doug Batchelor, so we sort of had one in the bank that we could show, that we're not going to ambush anyone or we didn't have an agenda or anything. Right.
That was part of it too, that we tried to emphasize that we're not here to, put him on the hot, like our goal, and sometimes people don't like this, but it's actually not our goal to debate people. Whether we have someone on, like, whether we have Ted Wilson on, who we don't, there were fundamental things we disagreed with about his tone and things that he had done, but also we've had ex-Adventists on the show. And sure. People have also said, hey, why didn't you push back harder on the things that they said? And it's because our goal is not to debate, although there may be times that we do push back with our own thoughts. That's not what we are. Our channel and our organization, we're not about debating others. That's not what we're here to do. So we tried to make that clear to Ted Wilson and his office. And the only thing that they asked for was like a conference president to send an email recommendation that we were members and employees in good standing. And then from there, we just set up the interview. And it sounds like it, once the GC office, from some of the conversations we had afterwards with some people in the GC, no one had any idea this was happening. So they had known about Seeking What They Saw. But then once the interview happened, they were all kind of shocked. They're like, wait, did Ted Wilson just go on a show? What just happened? They were kind of shocked that it happened. I don't think it had been communicated, or there was no channel beyond the secretary and Ted Wilson that this was going to happen. So, yeah, very interesting to find that out afterwards, that they had never really experienced that in that office before.
Let's shift here. I asked these guys to give us a few clips from their show. I'm assuming probably Anthony is going to do that since he's in an office. Anthony, go ahead. Tell us about what you're going to show us.
For sure. So I got a few clips here. The first one is from our Ted Wilson conversation, and it's an interesting conversation about unity, just some of the things that he said. And Bjorn, I haven't forgotten your question because you're kind of asking about how that conversation went, and maybe I can talk more about that after, but
I'd love to hear how it actually went. But all right, we can do the clips for sure. Yeah.
Okay. How do I just share, Lauren?
Yeah, you just
share?
get your video ready to queue up, and when you click on the little green share button at the bottom of the screen, and then you select the place where that's at, and it'll show to all of us.
Okay. And share. Can you
There
see
you
it?
go. You got it.
Okay, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, and you tell me if you can hear it. You can hear it? Is that okay?
I'm not hearing it, Anthony.
No, can't hear anything.
Um,
If it's not set up in the right way, you may have to actually take your microphone and put it next to a speaker or something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
Anthony, when you share, sometimes there's a spot where it says share audio as well before you click share.
There you go.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to reshare again, second time. Okay, Google Chrome, share sound. There it is. Okay. Let's try that again. Okay.
Most powerful ways.
You can hear it?
Yes.
Now we can.
Okay, perfect.
Ways to be in unity is, number one, to try by God's grace to understand what truth is, and then ask the Lord, now help me share it. When you're sharing it with people, when you're actively helping others, you are almost inoculated against the kind of infighting that we see happening in places where the church is not growing. So I think one of the most powerful ways to be in unity is.
So in that conversation, we talked about a lot of things, but one of the major things we talked about was about unity, and Elder Wilson felt really strongly that when we're sharing the truth, it's a good way to be united. But one of the, I guess this kind of answers your question, Bjorn. One of the things, I guess, points of tension or dissonance that we kept running into with him was, what if we have disagreements about that truth? What if we hold that truth differently? What if the language we use for that truth is different from, if the language I use to communicate that truth is language that you don't think accurately, represents that truth. So I guess that, and to answer your original question, that was, I think, part of the tension of the episode. It was a good conversation, but we just so fundamentally disagreed on so many things that it was difficult to really connect, I think, with each other.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, because you can see his point and what he's saying there, but yeah, as you said, his parameters are quite narrow. I mean, I remember being quite hurt, actually, because I tried to interview him twice, and once I was approaching him from a Spectrum point of view. I was doing a Spectrum story, and I'd flown to Japan, and I tried to talk to him there, and he basically said that you guys aren't Adventist. That by implication, he said, we only talk to Adventist groups, or whatever media groups or whatever it was, and I'm sure even that on face value is not entirely accurate. I'm sure he would talk to I'm guessing he would talk to other news agencies and that kind of thing. So I don't know, the othering that you felt in that kind of a context, if you didn't exactly follow his view of things, was a little bit alienating. I know he has great personal charm. I know I see him as a good person, all of that. But yeah, that kind of my way or the highway was difficult, I think, for a lot of people.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it should be understood that traditionally, probably all of our history, Seventh-day Adventism has been defined by truth, acceptance or rejection of truth, and doing these certain things that go along with that. And I was going to say one of the things that was interesting about listening to Ted at Elder Wilson at the GC was that he immediately goes to the boundary between truth and untruth. If somebody asks him a question, he automatically goes right there and says, "This
Very
is
true.
true. This is not true."
Yep.
And when they talked to Burton Kaler, his answer was much more nuanced. He said, "I want to stick with the Bible, but I'm willing to talk to anyone." Well, he didn't really tell us anything, but it was it was a more flexible answer. And you could tell that people were charmed by it because they were so used to this immediately going to, this is true, this is untrue. If you're here, you're in the truth. If you're not, you're out of the truth.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. That was definitely our experience. I think in our conversation with him was it was an immediate pivot to the boundary between truth and untruth, and I think a lot of our questions really exist in in the chasm between the two. Like, okay,
Mhm.
well, who defines? Is it general conference in session? Is it the collective witness or perspective, the zeitgeist of the Adventist local church? Is it who gets to define and at what point is truth? Is truth the words that are used, or is it the language? Is it the statement verbatim, the way that it's said, or what about present truth? Like, so there's so many questions I think there, but I think you're right about he tends to do that, and it makes conversation a little bit difficult. And I remember, I'll just be honest and transparent. I remember at a certain point in the conversation, it felt like we can't really have a conversation because you're not willing to exist in, and of course I respect him and the office of the president,
Of
but
course.
you're not really
Yeah.
willing to exist in that space to have that conversation. So we
Yeah.
can't really have a true, genuine conversation.
Yeah. No, he doesn't live in that broader space that a lot of us do. I want to keep an eye on the time here because, and by the way, Nana, I saw your hand. And any of the rest of you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand now, but I'm going to hold off a little bit until we see a few more clips. Sean, do you want to join in on what Anthony just said?
Yeah, we do have a few more clips here. I would say, yeah, um, he definitely set the tone at the beginning of the conversation before we started recording. Um,
Oh, true. Yeah, you got
again,
to tell him.
he wasn't threatening in necessarily the way he said anything, but I would say that when we did start, he did say, "I want to be clear, gentlemen, that under no circumstances can you ask me any questions about women's ordination." And that kind of set the tone. You know, I understand that it's up to him to say what he's not comfortable speaking about, but it definitely did set a tone that he was not ready to be open about certain things.
Yeah.
So that I think that did change the nature of our conversation as well. If you do watch that it's on YouTube, but it's also on our iTunes and Spotify page as well. If you watch the interview or listen to the interview, you'll notice that we are a bit more reserved in the way that we speak to him. In hindsight, could we have tried to push a little bit farther? We could have, but we were trying to, in some ways, extend an olive branch and try to start the conversation with him in hopes that we could get to deeper places in the future, because we knew we weren't going to be able to just grill him and expect a long-term relationship. And that's our goal. We're not here to just burn bridges with people. So again, in hindsight, maybe we could have tried to push in different areas a bit more, but he did kind of set a tone that he was not ready to do that.
The other thing that I have found key in understanding Ted Wilson is that organization is everything to him. The organization is the thing. And this is, I've talked to friends of his who even went to the academy with him, and they said all along it was always defending the organization. The institution is the key thing that we have to hold on to. And to me, as I watched him through the years, I think that's true. Anthony, do you have another one for us?
I do. Yes, this one is from our conversation with Ryan Day from 3ABN. And this was a conversation we had after he decided to leave 3ABN, and he basically announced that he believed Ellen White is a false prophet. So this is him talking about that.
Decision I've ever had to make in my life.
I don't doubt it.
I've spent all of my primary adult life in this church, straight out of college. Still in college, I was a member of this church, but straight out of college, right into ministry, right into preaching and teaching and representing this church, meeting hundreds of thousands of good people, creating relationships. So yeah, it has come at a cost. This wasn't an easy decision for me. I really, at the end of the day, I didn't tell myself, you know what, and I'm going to speak plainly here, to hell with these people, to hell with this church, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to ride off in the sunset and just say, forget them. I'm going to live my life, as the apostate that they think I am, and they can just all bite me. That's not been my mentality at all. This was the hardest.
So that was
Talk about that a little.
Yeah. So as soon as pretty recently after Ryan announced his departure, we reached out to him just because of the impact that it was making on the Adventist community, and we wanted to have a conversation. And I think we've become more and more interested in honest conversations like this. And it was great to chat with him and just hear his perspective. And I think this little clip right here was we had asked him, near the end of the conversation, hey, what has been the personal cost for you out of all of this? We've talked about all the other things, theology and all these other things, but what's been the personal cost to you? And he's talked about it hasn't been easy. He lost his livelihood, his whole career, everything he built his life upon, all of his education is in one area. But then talking about how he, just the vitriol, of the saints, so to speak, calling him an apostate and painting him out to be this villain when that was never really something he ever set out to do. He's just trying to follow his heart in the way that it's in the spirit where it's leading him. And while we didn't agree with everything he said, there were certainly, things about theology and Ellen White that I personally didn't agree with. I think just to hear his perspective, where he was at was valuable to us.
So did Ryan go to the extent of saying that Ellen White was actually a false prophet, that she was deceptive in that sense?
So he spoke a lot about, and Sean, you can pick up where I'm missing, but he spoke a lot about like the plagiarism accusations. He talked a lot about that and how, the way in which he was taught about Ellen White and the way in which she was framed, which he doesn't say this phrase throughout the episode, but my perception is that it was kind of a very word for word inspiration, literal, God beamed down every single word and she wrote it down verbatim. I think that because of the plagiarism accusations and some of those things, if you don't understand kind of what's going on there, I think that he really felt that totally discredited her from being the type of prophet that he was taught she was. And so, I don't think he believes she's a genuine prophet. Sean, I don't know if you have other.
Yeah, well, in the interview, he goes through his two spaces that really formed him as an Adventist coming out of the Pentecostal church. Was Amazing Facts, where he did his, at the Center of Evangelism, and then going to 3ABN. And in those spaces, is there actual growth and space to question and really push your faith? And he said, even today, after leaving, he said there's good biblical practices and studies that he really appreciates from those spaces. But I can tell from talking with him, there was no space to doubt or question many of these ideas, to the point where when we were discussing things, Jesse, and he has no problem with me outing him on this, he's been very vocal while we've gone through currently a sanctuary series that, the idea of investigative judgment and something that actually happened on 1844, he just he doesn't agree with that. He doesn't believe something happened in 1844. And when Ryan heard that, he said, brother, are you sure you want to say that on camera? I'm worried about your job being taken away. And we were all kind of laughing like, we inhabit two different spaces within the church. We're not that we're going to just go on and flippantly say anything, but we're also going to be very open about our spiritual and theological journeys and not move forward in fear. Where Ryan made one small comment on Facebook, I believe it was, that led to him being let go at 3ABN. And that's sometimes the impression with some of those organizations, where it almost feels like the church leaders have a gun held to their head. You better say the right thing. If you mess up, you're no longer one of us. And I told Ryan at the end of that interview, even though we disagree theologically on some things, I liked that version of him better than what I saw on the Sabbath School panel and on 3ABN.
Oh, yeah.
I liked what I saw there better. I saw a more genuine, open, authentic Christian Jesus follower. And I can disagree with him on some of those points about investigative judgment and spirit of prophecy, but I see a healthier spiritual atmosphere for him and for those listening to what he has to share from that point.
I was a little surprised at I hadn't even heard of Ryan because I'm not a 3ABN watcher, but I was a little surprised at the extent of how that affected people. I mean, that places like Africa and Asia, people were shocked and hurt by Ryan leaving. I've read.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Anthony, what else do you have for us?
Yeah, for sure. This is from our conversation with Ty Gibson during our series, What is an Adventist? So we had a series where we were trying to nail down, hey, what exactly is an Adventist? Let's nail down, we're talking about identity. Let's nail down, what does it mean to be an Adventist? Is the definition really narrow, or maybe is it broader than we thought? So this is from that conversation.
The active voices to help.
Actually, let me start that over. If I can, there we go. Come on, my friend. There we go.
To help reintroduce Adventists to Adventism in the light of the gospel. I mean, we have a crisis on our hands. Let me just give you a basic breakdown of how serious the crisis is. For example, we say we have 22 million members, right? This is the number we tell ourselves. And for some reason, we're impressed with that number in a population of 8 billion people. The number's not impressive, even if that number were true.
Yeah.
The reason we say we have 22 million members is because that's how many names we've written down of people we've baptized.
Yeah.
But we also keep other records. We also keep attendance records, and we know that worldwide, really, we only have about 6 million people that are actually showing up.
So that was
that's a pretty jarring statement there, isn't it?
Yeah, so he's basically saying on the books we have 22, but we only have about 6 that are actually engaging. And so Ty basically, this was a part of a conversation where he was basically arguing that we need to reintroduce Adventists to Adventism in a new way, a fresh way with totally new language. Basically reconvert Adventists with new language, all centered around God being love at the heart of it. So yeah, that was part of that conversation.
Well, that was a very good statement, and it's a statement I feel very comfortable with too, as a somewhat liberal Adventist. Sean, do you want to join on this one?
Yeah, our conversation with Ty is really powerful, and we've had some really good conversations with him where there's a lot of good happening in some of those spaces within Adventism where there's people pushing and being open, like he's been very candid in some of those ways. Yeah, and there's just something about the way that he articulates that helps us realize. And I think another thing at the GC was it David Trim that mentioned how many former Adventists, how many people have left the church. And it's somewhere around 42-43%, I think was a number that he had mentioned. These should be sobering numbers to us. Why is that happening? Why is it that so few are engaging, that even are on the books? And we just have to realize where we're at and why we're there. Not to just make us feel guilty about anything, but that's where I went back to what I said about, we're baptizing a ton of people all over the world, but again, what is it producing?
What's the fruit? Yeah.
What is the product? Is it creating people that are lifelong Jesus pursuers within the context of the Adventist Church? And why is it that so many leave? What's happening? So that's something to think about.
David has been throwing out this number now for about 10 years. Since I first heard it, he's revisited it at the executive committee meetings that I've been to. And it's interesting how little traction it has ever gotten. They'll turn right around and say, "We're proud to announce that we baptized 300,000 in New Guinea." And I'm just kind of like, so how many of them are, if you tell me how many people are actually coming to church, I'll be more impressed. But you never hear those numbers. We're still in that that other model.
Yeah.
Bjorn, jump in here when you want to. If not, I'll just have Anthony keep playing his clips.
Well, okay. In between the clips, have you ever been? Well, okay, I'm sure you have. But can you tell us about being turned down for an interview? How did that go? Or if not, if it's just been 100% success rate, who would you like to talk to? Who's on the list?
That's really interesting. We have been turned out. Sean, should I talk about George Knight?
Yeah, that's what you can mention. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we reached out to George Knight because we all read his books in undergrad, and we respect.
He's a legend.
He's a legend. His perspective, and we reached out to have an interview, to have a conversation. We reached out more than once, right, Sean? We at least twice.
Yeah.
At least twice, maybe 3 times, and every time he's turned us down. And I think he's mainly, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, was it due to health reasons?
It started the first time it was never a hard no. The first time was just, he was, I think, in the process of writing a book, and it was just really a hectic schedule for him. And then a few years later, when we asked, it had matured with us that his health was getting worse, and that it was becoming more difficult. Again, that's what we were shared with, but it was never like a hard no, like you guys are heretics and I can never waste time with you. But yeah, that was one where it just never lined up, unfortunately. We'd love to still have him on. I mean, we would love to have George Knight on.
Another
Last
one.
time I saw George, he had somebody where he was holding onto his arm wherever he walked, and I realized that he was frail.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a perfectly legitimate reason.
Yeah.
In George's case. Yeah.
Another one that's been tough is Dr. Richard Davidson at the seminary. Don't know if you know his name, but he recently wrote a book called Song for the Sanctuary, which is basically like the sanctuary doctrine, investigative judgment in totally new language, endorsed by the NAD. So he's pretty much the living most authoritative voice on sanctuary in the Adventist Church. And so we've tried to have him on for our sanctuary series, and that's currently in process. We've done one episode with him that we have yet to release, and nailing him down though for another one has been tough, just with scheduling. He's very busy. He's writing commentaries and traveling globally. So, but we haven't had anyone
there's been some hard no's, Anthony.
Sean handles all that stuff, so he knows more than me.
I do most of the scheduling. I do most of the scheduling, but the one, probably the most notable ones, there was one ex-Adventist ministry that said they were not interested in talking to us at all, even though we said we're very open and we've talked to ex-Adventists. We're not here to debate. We just want to have a conversation about your story.
I forgot about them.
They just told us absolutely not. There was just a pretty hard no there. The other one was
that Colleen Tinker and that group? Yeah. They're very bitter. We tried to reprint something on the gospel that they had printed, and it wasn't not just a hard no; it was a rude no.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the impression I got too. Even though I tried to have a nice conversation with their ministry, they just did not seem even open to conversation. So that was unfortunate. And then the other one was Walter Veith. We wanted to have him on and just hear his we have people on that we don't agree with, and a similar, I don't know if it would be rude, but they just said, no, we're not open to this at all. So that it was kind of a hard no after
Yeah.
trying
It's
to
just a
go.
shame because we'd
Yeah,
love to talk to Vyth.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
Anthony, you have anything more to show us?
I got one more for you.
Okay, good.
This is from our conversation with Tim Jennings. Don't know if you know that name.
Mm-hmm.
He
Now we do.
okay. Come and read.
After that
Oh, right.
spectacle. Yeah.
Yes, at the GC where his booth was asked to leave. Right.
Yep.
So yeah, he has his ministry, Come and Reason Ministries, and we had him on as well, and this was a chat bit from that.
What happens is in moral development, people who don't have the ability to see the deeper meaning in things get stuck on rules, and they gravitate toward positions of authority where they can define what the rules are because they get security and the right definitions and the right rules and the right enforcement and the right application. And what happens is the church ends up getting led by people who are actually at a very immature level of understanding, and they don't have and they really, and you see this. It's not me making up. Look at the people who crucified Christ. These people had a very primitive understanding. They were rule oriented, and they couldn't see the purpose that parents give rules to kids is to protect the kid from their own ignorance. It's not because the parents are setting up a legal justice system.
Powerful.
Powerful word. So that was also from our series, What is an Adventist? We had Tim Jennings on, and he has probably some of the most unique perspectives, huh, Sean, on Adventism in general.
Yeah, he's a very interesting figure. We've spoken to him. We just to give you all a heads up, we even spoke to him and recorded an episode we'll release soon on sanctuary and investigative judgment. And
some of the most unique ideas I've ever heard, probably.
And in context, as you had mentioned, Bjorn, he was kicked out of the GC, his ministry, Come and Reason Ministries. We had actually previously set up, since we were going to come to the GC, to record with him there at the GC. The episode there, and so we actually had to adjust, and he was still there when we got there, but we actually had to go to the neighboring hotel, the Marriott, and find a recording spot there with him. So we actually recorded the episode outside of the GC because he was kicked out, and continued on with that episode.
Wow. Did you ever get, like, I know no one's really been given the official reason, but was it like vaccines or?
He told us they didn't.
Go ahead, Anthony. Go ahead.
The only thing that and Sean you can interject. The only thing that I remember him telling us, because we asked about it, was that someone from the GC came to his booth and told him that they needed to leave, that they were out of, what was the word? Out of alignment?
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
I heard that word used.
That and when he asked for more clarification, they wouldn't give it to him. They wouldn't tell him anything else. They just kept repeating the phrase, "Sorry, you're out of alignment. You must leave." And so that's all that he shared with us.
I think he has some unusual views of homosexuality, perhaps.
Well, what makes, and again, we could go on about this for a long time, but I'll summarize very briefly. Look, there's many things that are very interesting about Tim Jennings. There's things that both Anthony and I resonate deeply with, some of the things that he brings up when it comes to the criticism of the legal penal ideas of Scripture, when it comes to the idea of design law. There's a lot of compelling stuff he goes into. He does have some interesting stuff on medical, whether it comes to COVID vaccine. There's a lot of stuff there that we don't have time for, but he has some hot takes, we'll put it that way. And he also
for sure.
So there's some times that he's been very outspoken about some of those political or other issues. So I know that he can be disagreeable in that way. But from his perspective, I haven't talked to anyone in the GC that knows why he was kicked out. From his experience, they were there for 5 days, and he said they had a very positive experience, had GC officials, pastors, conference leaders come by and had very positive words to share with them, and said there was nothing that would have made sense for why they would have been kicked out. There was no lead up to it, no warnings, no red flags. That's all.
No explanation. No explanation since.
From his perspective, yes. I haven't heard the other side, but that's what we were told. Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, let me take a little break here and remind you that next week we have on a fellow that I consider one of the most interesting Seventh-day Adventists I've ever met. and I'm having him on now, even though he was on just a couple of months ago. His name is Stephen Ferguson. Stephen is an attorney from Perth, Australia, and I'm having him on now because he just happens to be in Europe right now, so he's adjusted to the time. When he's in Perth, it's just literally impossible. He's got to get up at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., something like that. So we haven't had him on. Anthony and Sean, you ought to get acquainted with this fella. He's really an interesting and thoughtful
I think I know
layperson.
Stephen. I actually think I know Stephen. I actually think I went to college with Stephen.
In Australia?
May, is he Australian?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he's ever been over to the United States
fair,
for any
okay.
extended length of time.
I know another Stephen.
But yeah, really interesting fella. And he's going to be his title, if you guys are ready for this, is God Did Not Write the Bible. And yeah, he has a pretty advanced view of what it means, what inspiration means, and he's going to be unpacking that for us. And the interesting thing about Stephen is that he's a very serious Seventh-day Adventist. He's preaches in his church. He's very dedicated. He loves the church, but he does not see it in ways that you and I are used to. And so I've always said Stephen is one of the most interesting Seventh-day Adventists I've ever met. He works as an attorney, but he took an advanced degree in theology from a seminary that is not an Adventist seminary. So we're going to have him on next week. And Bjorn, do you want to just mention just briefly again before we go to? Oh, by the way, everybody, this is a time to raise your hands. Raise your hands now, folks. We want to give these guys some good reactions. Bjorn, do you want to tell people again about where you are and what you're doing, and just remind them of that?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I cannot pronounce things the correct way around here, but Finale Ligure, or it's on the Ligurian coast near. It's I've run about 140 miles from Pisa to here, and I'm on the way to Monte Carlo. It was fairly easy running the early part of the week. Now, I mean, yeah, easy is a relative term, doing a marathon a day, but it is getting significantly hotter. So do think of me. It's pretty intense. So I'm going to be running earlier in the day for sure. I'll hopefully be done by Tuesday and finish the 220 miles. But anyway, I'm doing a big challenge. It's called the AT Summer Challenge, and raising money for Adventist Today for ATSS. So thanks, guys, for supporting. I really, really deeply appreciate it. And the really cool thing this year is not just me doing the summer challenge. This is something that we want more people to take on. And Sherry Ann, who's on the call, is also doing a challenge. She's posting a picture from the Caribbean with a cool thought each day. And I've been following that and very inspired. And Heather May, who is often on this call as well on ATSS, is also doing something. She's doing a recipe a day, a healthy recipe a day. That's her AT Summer Challenge, her August challenge. So thanks everyone for supporting. So many of you have given already, and that's really why we can do ATSS and Adventist Today, because we have supporters like you. It's deeply meaningful. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and it really warms us when we hear from you guys, and just want to really, really express my gratitude. So I'll post the links again, and thank you in advance.
So it's not too late to support you.
Certainly not too late.
All right. Nana, you had your hand up. Do you want to join in the conversation now, or do others? I think she had to leave. Anyway, let's get some conversation going here. I'm fascinated by what you guys have done and the people you've talked to, and very pleased that you've had the response that you have. By the way, do either of you, do you have any idea how many people are listening to the podcast in any given week?
That's probably something we'd have to look at the numbers, Sean. I know there last year I didn't we do 100,000, Sean, on
Yeah. So
on
I mean,
listening
if you
platforms?
right, well, if you combine, so the main three platforms we're on are YouTube for video and audio, and then we do iTunes and Spotify. So if you combine all of those, we're I don't know, Anthony, if at some point we're probably just shy of 1 million between the three. It's majority, like we've seen a pretty big
Yeah.
growth, especially in YouTube. And then I would say iTunes, Spotify, they kind of interchange. But, between episodes, if you combine the three, there's somewhere between, um, 5 to 15,000 on average per episode. And then
Yeah.
there's some like with Ryan that went quite a bit bigger, or Ted Wilson or Doug Batchelor or
30,
Ty
50.
Gibson, where if it's a guest that might be a more recognizable name, it might go, beyond that. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's a good community, and then we have a number that uh, don't always have the patience to listen to long form, so they'll
Hmm.
they'll go to our socials on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, or we have accounts and watch clips or be part of our community there as well.
Okay. Sherry Ann, yeah, you're on.
Hi, thanks, Lauren, and thanks, guys. I really appreciate you sharing and your ministry of the podcast. I have one bit of a quip when you said the former Adventist ministry that they didn't want to talk to you, and they were very hard and fast about it. As I thought, kind of cheekily, that's very Adventist of them. Because we actually do have a culture of not really talking to people with differing views. But I really wanted to get back to the question of culture that was asked at the beginning. And I'm interested in any common themes, anything that you're seeing that could say, oh, culturally, this is a part of Adventism. As I have moved away from home and also been just kind of exploring my faith a little more of a nuanced approach. I've been described as a cultural Adventist because there are some things that, regardless of where I go, it's. I grew up. I started going to an Adventist church when I was 4. So 38 years later, there are some things that are still going to be the same. So I'm not. So I'm curious of the guests that you've had with their varying perspectives. What are some of the common themes that you could highlight to say culturally? This is what you're seeing about Adventism.
Fantastic question. Anthony, you're unmuted. Do you want to try that?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for your question, Sherry Ann. Did I say your name right, by the way?
Yes, you did.
Okay, yeah. Great to meet you. Thank you for your question. I think for sure. I mean, this is going to be an easy answer, a cliche answer, maybe on the nose, but Sabbath. I think in having conversations with people across the spectrum, it's interesting to see that even those maybe that you might consider on the far left and the far right of Adventism, Sabbath is a collective value. It's a collective cultural. It's not only theological, but something that we all do and that people do. But it's interesting to note how people hold it differently. And but I definitely think it is a cultural touchstone for sure that, which I mean, it makes sense that it would be, but I think it's surprising to see that even those that maybe on the right might consider the liberals, they value Sabbath just in maybe in a different way. They hold it a little bit differently. And then in conversations with maybe those who are more traditional or conservative, it's interesting to see that maybe their views are more nuanced than maybe those on the left might pigeonhole them as. So I definitely think Sabbath is, while like kind of a cliche answer, I definitely think you see it across a massive spectrum of people that it's a value that does seem to unite, a cultural touchstone that seems to unite us. So
Okay. All right. Thanks for that.
Sean?
Yeah, I think Anthony answered it great. There's differences, but there is something about getting together with people that are Adventists that sometimes it almost feels like an intangible. There's just a certain way about it that feels like you're a part of home. And I've even found that to be on both sides. There's times where I'll be in a more conservative church and there's just something that can still be found there. And then also at more liberal spaces, you'll still find And as Anthony mentioned, Sabbath is a great example. There's just so many great memories I have, even with all the challenges I have, remembering Adventism, the things that have hurt me, the things that haven't been done right. There's things I look back and there's a warmth I still have for those experiences. And I think that's something each person we talked to, there was a certain amount of warmth that they look at the Adventist church and they have a love for this church. Even if there's disagreements on certain things, there's a love that feels very different, I guess is the best way to put it when it comes to Adventism.
Yeah, I've often wondered about the role. By the way, I turned my camera off because I'm having a little bit of connection problems here. I've often wondered about the role of the very specific things that Adventists hold. I find the concept of clean and unclean meats, for example, fairly insupportable in Scripture. The way it jumps over from the Old Testament and jumps over all the things that Paul said about meat and drink and what Jesus said about and yet it's such an identity.
Yeah.
It's so important to the identity. People actually look for what you eat or what you're not eating.
Yep. If there was to be one other touchstone, just I guess to get back to her question, it would be probably health. It would be probably an Adventist value of vegetarianism and health, and sometimes that's taken to extremes, but that would probably be the other one.
And I'm not actually sure it's health, Anthony. I think there's
That's
something
fair.
sacred about the what you take into your body sort of identifies whether you're part of the group or not.
You're
Wait,
saying veggie meat.
Well, I've given this example to the class before, but you sit down and ask somebody if you see two Adventists and one's eating some split pea soup that has a tiny little bit of pig meat in it, and you see another guy eating a 24-ounce rare steak, which one is more Adventist? And
that's a conundrum.
you'll tie them in knots because they want to say health, but the one guy's eating clean meat, so he must be okay. The other guy's eating unclean meat, but his soup is probably healthier. So it's very interesting. You can let me not stick with that. Let me go on to Gina Jett, one of my favorite ex-Adventists.
Well, thank you. I wanted to raise an observation that I had and just see if you think that what you're doing may be a bridge here. My children both went to Pacific Union College and graduated from there, and they had a large circle of Adventist friends. And it was a very dynamic group with a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm and things to talk about. And I just think as they left the college scene and went back to their home churches, many of them found, especially in smaller communities, very strict and stodgy churches where they really didn't feel like they could ever belong there. A lot of rule following and judgmental thinking that squelched new ideas. And I see their friends, and a lot of them have just walked away. They're never going to belong probably to another church, but this just isn't working for them. And I wonder if you see your ministry as a bridge, and if you can see any other efforts that could be made to transition high energy college Adventists to high energy pew abiding Adventists.
Oh man, Anthony. So without giving away too much, there's some stuff we're working on, both that integrates with the podcast and then outside of it. And I'm going to keep it vague because we're still not ready to unveil all that's going to look like. But I want you to know, that our heart is deep for those both that still remain within the church and have also left, in finding meaningful ways to connect. And we have been able to connect with many that have sent us messages, whether they're former Adventists or not, that have said, thank you for creating this space of discussion and having these topics. It's the first time I felt like if this was what Adventism was, I would have stayed. I wouldn't have left if there was the space. There's some that say that their local church they just have no presence in, they don't feel like they can belong, but that when they listen to us, it feels like their church, their experience. And we're not looking to replace church, but to hear that is just deeply humbling and beautiful to see that there are conversations, there are people that are longing for connection, that are longing for a space to belong. And that, you know, our little corner of the digital world, there's a space for that. And so we're working on addressing some of those things, and it has to do with telling a better story. I know, Anthony, we could probably go a little bit deeper than that, but ultimately we're looking at ways to tell the better story of Adventism, that we believe fundamentally that Adventism is beautiful, and that there's been times in our church history that it's been co-opted in ways that have darkened and caused deep hurt. And so we don't want to shy away, and we want to own those things while also highlighting and bringing us together into telling the beautiful, better story of Adventism, which ultimately points to this good God, this beautiful God who has a plan for us. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff we're looking at. And again, we want to hear from people like you. When you have those questions or those reflections, we want to hear from you guys and know how we can better connect people. So yeah, for sure. Tell people that are interested, they can email us, they can connect with us on Instagram. We'd love to have conversations with them and help them find spaces they belong.
I wonder, let me ask you this, Sean and Anthony. I could be wrong, but my impression, you know, when I was on the floor at GC, the floor was this stodgy pseudo-democracy that was going on, doing nothing of any importance, but very organizationally supportive, but really doing nothing of any spiritual importance out there. And then Bjorn and I would walk over into the exhibition hall, and we'd see all these young people from South America and different places, so enthusiastic. And I really wondered, I could be wrong, but I really wondered, is all that spirit that we saw from these younger people based on the same stodgy stuff that was going on the floor? Is it based on doctrines and fundamental beliefs, or is it in a whole different place entirely? Because I know so many of these young people who really are not, you know, they've sort of abandoned some of those cultural markers. They really are not as strict about some of the things that their elders were, but they're still Adventists. They still go to church on Sabbath morning sometimes. Like the doctrines and the fundamental beliefs aren't quite as important to them as they once were.
I mean, first off, Gina, thank you so much for that question. That story is not in isolation. That is the story of so many of my personal friends. That's my story. I was a theology major that graduated and pastored a church that I would never invite anyone to, and I would not have attended if I was not its pastor. So,
Me too.
thank you for sharing that. I think to your question, Lauren, I definitely think there's a dissonance for sure. I think there's a dissonance. It's really hard. I don't know the solution to it, but I definitely think it is a very real dissonance that there is I don't know. I mean, actually, here's what I'll say. I definitely think there is a growing, I'm a young adult pastor. I have conversations with people 18 to 30 every day, basically. And I don't think that young adults are feeling, I don't think that they're really truly in opposition, maybe even necessarily with the fundamental belief, the 28, or they're in opposition necessarily with doctrine per se. I think maybe they're just in opposition to fundamentalism and to, like what you're saying, a stodgy spirit of not generosity, but I don't know, just like a stingy spirituality,
a boundary setting and
yeah.
judgmentalism. The first time I remember thinking about this was a couple I had in my church who were very enthusiastic for Adventism, And when we'd get together, they would pray prayers about the falling of the latter rain. But they were shacked up together, and it never really bothered them. They just thought, this is what we need to do in order to get to live right now, and we're not getting married right away. And so the what appeared a real clear conflict to me, a cognitive dissonance between where I had been and where they were, didn't appear that way to them. It didn't bother me. I never judged them for it. I just thought it was interesting.
And I mean, there could be two answers. One of them could be, I think there's a resurgence of Adventists discovering the gospel, frankly, and they're discovering justification by grace through faith, and they're discovering freedom in Christ in a new way, and discovering Paul's, all of his letters and his word to the Corinthians and Galatians, and discovering what freedom in Christ is like, and freedom from a shame-based legalistic Adventism and religion. So I think maybe that's a part of it. But then maybe on the other hand, there's also a sort of because of the pain, I think, of a stingy legalistic religion, people just throw out sort of the idea that there's a God that would care about that stuff. So they throw it out, and that they're just doing what feels right to them. So I think perhaps it tends to be one or the other.
Stingy religion, I like that. Bill Garber, join us.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the few times that I've had opportunity to observe the questions and the dialogue you've had. I'm especially touched by the statement seeking what they sought. And does this go back to pre-Miller? Does it go back to post-Miller but pre-Seventh-day Adventist? How far back does it go? For me, I'm really attracted to the sense that when Millerism blew up, for the next nearly 20 years before the Seventh-day Adventist Church was formalized, out of some level of necessity, people hung together based on their experience and the history of their experience, and they described in reflection the Millerite experience as, I quote one of them, the most sublime sense of God's presence of my lifetime. And when it became necessary for perhaps non-religious reasons to form the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the first thing they did was make sure that it was organized by reason of their experience and not a creed. And they declared simply, well, the Bible is our creed. And this went on for some time. Is that even possible to recover today? Or is it structurally not good? The Seventh-day Adventist Church did not vote at a general conference session for a statement of fundamental beliefs until 1980. Not that we didn't have a list of beliefs and so on, but never at the top level. And I'm wondering, could we actually get back to depending on the experience and not a creed, if you will? Is that that even a possibility?
Yeah.
Excellent question, Bill.
Yeah. Well, Anthony, I'll let you go. I just wanted to mention the last part that you mentioned was that 1980 GC session. We just did a interview with Larry Garrity, who was one of the members from Andrews at that time that had voted or even was part of approving the fundamental beliefs, including like the sanctuary, and just hearing about the story of that GC and how things went right before Glacier View. We know what happened with Des Ford. Yeah, there's a lot of fruit from our church that we see in practice caused a lot of pain. And what you're longing for, that's something I think we definitely long for, which is the idea that there's a spirit of a movement versus what I think some of us have coined the term, Adventist Incorporated, that there's this big, business-like structure to the church, and that to be an employee, to be a speaker for it, you need to not only uphold the 28 essentially as a creed, but a certain specific interpretation of them, versus being able to look at them as they were designed, which was to be an outward-facing document to others that had questions about, in general, what did Adventists believe? That was the purpose of them. It wasn't meant to be a litmus test for who could be an employee of the church or not, or who could be a member of the church or not. So yeah, I think we're in alignment there, Bill, that we desire for that to be true. But things need to change for that to be a possibility. The reality is that's not currently how the organization is set up to operate. So there needs to be change for that to happen.
I really appreciate your question, Bill, and it's something that we've come back to time and time again in conversations, especially those with ex-Adventists. We had a conversation with an ex-Adventist named Miles, and we talked a lot about creeds and how Adventists are anti-creedal, we're non-creedal. And I think maybe my answer to what you're asking is like, because what I hear you saying is, do you think we could ever go back to that spirit? And I think that I will say that I see a lot of hope for that. During my time at the seminary, basically every professor that I had all reinforced the idea that Adventism is non-creedal. And it was so heavily, not enforced, but so heavily reiterated, the idea that to be an Adventist means we're pushing back against the idea of the creed. It should be so heavily a part of our identity, that I saw so many of the most prominent Adventist thinkers all believe this deeply. And so I guess all that to say, I think there is hope in the sense that there are a lot of Adventists who feel the same way. And I don't know, perhaps my hope is mixed with cynicism. I don't know that the institution could ever do that, could ever pull back the clock and do that. It's in the institution's best interest to perpetuate itself. And that's just the reality. That's not me saying I don't. Mm-hmm. I work for an institution, right? Well, Sean and Jesse and I, we all are employed by the Adventist institution. We love our jobs, but at the same time, you have to be realistic. But I do think there is a spirit that exists within Adventism that's maybe more prominent than it seems, that I think many Adventists feel, hey, we are people that push back against the creed. So I think it does exist.
I really appreciate your hope that the spirit is not confined.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
I walked away from seminary thinking, oh, this is what the Adventists believe. So if anyone tries to tell me something else, that's not Adventism, because they've defined it for me. We're anti-creedal. This is who we are.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Bill, for a good question. Emmanuel, it's your turn. I think I've got you unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think, Anthony, you used a word a few minutes ago, out of alignment. And I watched your interview with Pastor Ted Wilson, and more than once I was convinced he was dying. He wanted to be somewhere else, not with you. So in June 5th, 2025, Fulcrum 7 published an article titled, "A Book to Avoid Reclaiming the Prophet." I noticed the book is written by 11 scholars. 8 out of 11 are retired. So the questions that I have for you, it seems that when the scholars are retired, they can talk. When they are not retired, they cannot talk. So my question for you, did you encounter when you want to interview some people, oh yes, Anthony, I want to talk, but don't touch this, don't touch that, don't touch this, don't touch that. Or they are really open to talk to you?
That's a great question, Emmanuel. Thank you. I think we've had some interesting conversations. So we've interviewed two of the most prominent seminary professors currently, Dr. Roy Gain and Dr. Richard Davidson, and had similar comments from both of them. A little bit more on Roy Gain's part. He mentioned in one of our interview with him, we did an interview on LGBTQ plus Adventists in the Bible, seeking biblical answers from different perspectives on the issue of LGBTQ people and same-sex attraction. And in our conversation with Dr. Gain, he mentioned something very briefly where he basically said, I work for the institution, so I'm not able to share totally freely right now about that. And he just came out and said it. And I'm not quoting him verbatim, so I don't want to say I am, but he essentially to that sentiment. When we interviewed Ted Wilson, Elder Wilson, he basically, as Sean mentioned, he said, before we started recording, I will not touch these topics. So I do think maybe what I hear, I think I sense your question is getting at is that there are certain things that perhaps Adventist employees of the institutions feel they're not able to fully speak on. I think that maybe there is some truth to that. Although I will say we haven't been fired yet for having our conversations. So I guess that depends which space in Adventism you inhabit. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
And thank you, Emmanuel. Good question. Dr. Hain, it's so nice to have you on. By the way, thank you for good pieces about vaccines this week, although it has resulted in a number of people pestering me with long sermons about how I'm going to die from the vaccines, which I'm going to send all on to you to answer. I'm not going to even try, man. But go ahead and address Anthony and Sean.
Well, I'm going to thank Anthony and I'm going to thank Sean, but I want to just remind Sean that I'm a graduate of San Gabriel Academy. I started to go to school there when it was San Gabriel Union School, and then the school grew to accommodate me. And so I want to make sure that you check in your library and make sure that the book that Adventist Today published by me is in your library. It's called Adventist Tomorrow. So if it's not, let me know and I'll send you a copy to put in there.
Sounds good. Cool.
For both of you, and now I'm going to talk to Ed Reifsnyder and to Lauren and to Bjorn and other members of the other members of the Adventist Today board. We need to have on our Adventist Today publication a calendar where we list these resources. We need to list these young men, and when they're on, where we can find them. We need to list the controversial open Sabbath schools. We need to, I think, part of our duty to the Adventist Church as an independent voice is to have a place where we publicize. Now, I know we love this meeting. This is the wonderful thing, but there's so many other things going on that we could talk to, or and we can make comments on them. We can say Anthony's a little sharp or Sean's a little mellow, or we can comment on them, but I think we ought to publicize them. So I'm asking my Adventist Today board to consider part of our ministry of adding to it, publicizing these fresh, new, open resources and just putting them out there so we all get more readers.
Good thing we have a board meeting tomorrow.
Are you going to be surviving to be there?
That's a big if. I'm going to try.
I worry about your feet and your knees. This is a long run you're on, Sean. I mean, Born, but anyway, yeah. So let's just say this is great and beautiful, and thank you to Anthony and Sean and their partners, and let's let it happen a lot, because the Adventists I know are lovely people, And they came to Adventism because they saw something they needed and wanted, and it's been taken away from them. And we need to find ways of giving it back. Thanks.
Yeah, that line that's been taken away from them is pretty powerful, Jack. Sean, want to respond to that?
Wow. That line specifically is one that we have been reflecting on very much. The word that we've ended on, and we've tried to be careful about the way we word this because we know that some can be offended by it. And we're not trying to go out and just provoke people. We actually want to make a little call of invitation, like I had alluded to earlier. We're working on something a bit behind the scenes with some people on our team. A word that we've used beyond that is just co-opted. Adventism has been co-opted, and it has been for a long time. And we desire to see a true, Anthony, you used the word primal Adventism, that we admire when we see the birth of that movement. And I think it was asked earlier, like, how far back do we seek what they sought? Yeah, it goes back all throughout church history and ultimately to Jesus. We just see this imperfect group of people all throughout history trying to follow the ways of Jesus. And the messiness of that desire to follow the gospel, that's part of it. There's beauty in the messiness, and we can't do that with the way that we're currently set up. And so we do need to see some changes so that some of our fundamentalist tendencies change and allow for us to grow and tell a better story. So yeah, a lot that I resonate with what was shared.
Ed Reisnider, your turn.
Thank you. Well, Jack Keene has called me out. I am the chairman of the board of the Adventist Today board. And Jack, I think your idea is a good one. I'd also like to say, as the board chairman, that I had the opportunity to spend a few days with Lauren and Bjorn at the general conference session. And I was very impressed with their energy, their enthusiasm for the task at hand. We have good leadership in Adventist Today. But I just wanted to ask a question of Sean and Anthony, and it might be an unfair question. Based on your experiences now with seeking what they sought, as well as your own personal journeys, what is the one or two changes to Adventism you would make if you were suddenly co-kings of the Adventist Church? I mean, you've heard a lot of perspectives. You've probably seen a number of dysfunctionalities. What would you like to transform if you could do so?
That's a great question. Thank you so much, Ed. I think as Sean alluded to, we've been having some new conversations behind the scenes, and we've been, I'm kind of almost asking a similar question to that. Like, if we could re-envision Adventism, what would it look like? And I think one of the things that, if I was a co-king for a day, I think that I would love to see, a concise articulation of the heart of Adventism perpetuated on every level of Adventist education and across every church. And I guess what I mean by that is, growing up in the church, nobody ever gave me, hey, this is what Adventism is all about in a nutshell. Here's the heart and soul of the whole thing. Here's the point. What's the why? Why are we here? Why are we giving money? It's like, oh, Jesus is coming again. That was given as one of the answers. We got to worship on the Sabbath. That was given as one of the answers. But there was never sort of an interconnected, systematized why. And I think what I would advocate be that why is the big idea that God is actually better than we ever thought. And that's our why. That's the flag we're carrying into the world. That's our compelling story to tell. And I think so if I were a king for a day, I think that would probably be, I would love to see that flag be waved in every Adventist institution and across every Adventist local church. God is better than we ever thought. He's actually love in a way that it transcends how we ever thought that he could be. So I don't know. That's a little vague.
So
But
they did give they did give you an answer, Anthony. You just didn't like it.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Well,
It sounds like the answer that they gave you was the one that a lot of us received too, and I didn't like it either, and I struggled against it for my entire ministry. But yeah, they did give you an answer. That is the answer that most
right.
Adventists will give you. Sean, you were asked the question too, so go ahead.
And the problem, sorry, not to cut you off, Sean. I
No,
think
no, no, go ahead.
the problem is those answers are inherently non-compelling answers, at least in my opinion, and in the opinion of having conversations, especially with young adults and other people I've pastored through over a decade of pastoral ministry, is the answer at a certain point is just not, it's not compelling. It's not good enough. And so I think the idea that maybe there could be a better answer, that it resonates with me. So
Yeah. I think instead of being a sum of our part, like if you just say, oh, we're about the health message, we're about Sabbath, we're about second coming, we've kind of divided those up, and they've become these legalistic measures of, church membership or whatever. Instead, I think, as Anthony said, there's something about when you take the pieces that are core to Adventism when it comes to our beliefs, that it actually, when actually followed to its core, what they actually stand for, they point to a picture of God that I believe can be seen most beautifully through the Adventist Church. And it points to a God that is so good, that is so merciful, and the actual mercy of God and his grace, when actually followed to its end, not in the ways that it's been, like I said earlier, co-opted to be used and frankly misused, to be this legalistic measure or separation point. When it's holistically taken together, there is such a beautiful message in Adventism that tells the best story of who God is. Now, I'm not saying that as an exclusive thing, that you can't be an amazing Jesus follower outside of Adventism. I believe you can, but I think actually followed and combined together, if we could create a space where we can look at the totality of the Adventist message through the Bible, there is such a beautiful picture of God that we need to be telling better. And that's a very short answer. I think I'd love to go on the journey with others, and we are planning to go on a journey with others to show what that beautiful story is.
Lauren, could I respond?
Of course.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. And neither one of you said anything that is so much of what we hear about. You didn't say anything about screaming like three angels. You've just put in a whole new focus on what we usually hear is important to Adventism. So thank you very much. And by the way, Jack, Bjorn is running tomorrow before the board meeting. So we hope he's present and accounted for.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good questions. George, oh, wait a minute. I promised Bjorn I'd slip him in here. Bjorn, are you there?
Hey, yeah. So I guess I mean I really like this sort of rearticulation of the gist of Adventism. And it's like part of me wishes it were true of like what Adventism, experientially is. And perhaps it can get there. I guess like a lot of my empathy lies with people that either are formerly Adventist or are Adventist but just don't go to church, and it's there's this feeling of lack of community, and it's for many different reasons. It could be just geography. They haven't found a church that actually works for them, or there's some kind of disagreement or whatever. But I talk to them, and including family members, and there's like this yearning for the community. It's like, well, I'm no longer an Adventist, but man, do I miss the community. Man, do I miss the sort of the fellowship side of it. So I know you guys can't talk about the plans that you're kind of working on, but how can we do a better job of helping people experience the community of Adventism and the kind of the positive sides that brings, positive aspects of that, even if perhaps they, their faith journey is taking a different turn, or they just don't have faith. Like, is there a way to engage the cultural Adventist, so to speak, that's better? I know we've spoken to it, but I don't know. That really bothers me fundamentally, that we've alienated this group, and I feel like we're not doing good enough a job of re-engaging.
I think that's a great question, Bjorn. And honestly, I think my heart lies in very similar places. I inhabit very similar spaces amongst my friends and people that I know and love that have walked away, that have left, but they still resonate so deeply with the culture and the family and the haystacks and the whatever it may be. Yeah, I think that my answer is that I don't know. I think that's my most honest answer, but I will say what has given me hope are pockets and places, whether that be a local church or just a group of friends or people that reach out, that make space for that person or persons from that perspective, where it's very clear, they articulate it very clearly. You're safe here. You're actually more than safe. You're wanted here. You're welcome here. And that's the type of church that I want to be a part of creating. And that's actually the type of church. The reason why I said yes to actually being at my current context is because the senior pastor wants this to be that kind of church. And so that's the kind of project that we're working on here down in Keene, Texas. But I see pockets and places and tiny little specks and sparks of places where people are doing that. And so my biggest hope is that people would be able to interact with a space like ours and say, wow, I haven't really felt welcome in an Adventist church in 20 years, in 30 years, but here I feel like I'm safe to be here. That is my dream and hope. And so I think that maybe that's a piece of the pie. If the answer is a pie, maybe that's a slice of the sweet potato, and just normal people in local spaces making it very clear that, hey, if you have a little tension, you have a little dissonance, if you've been hurt or harmed by the institution, you're safe here. This can be home for you. And then making sure that the hard part is making sure your actions line up with what you're saying. That's where the work lies. But I think that's what gives me hope.
Here's the thing, Anthony, that needs to be kept in perspective. I finished my ministry in a cluster of small churches. If you went to, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. I mean, you're in a very large, resourced church. Yep. Bjorn is in a lovely church at Newbold College. 19 out of 20 churches that I could go to I don't think I'm exaggerating too much. 19 out of 20 churches out of 100 churches. So 95 out of those 100 churches in Ohio. If I went there today, there'd be fewer than 50 people in worship, maybe fewer than 40. And if I walked in having an earring in one of my ears or whatever, I would not feel welcome there. It's just the nature. Most of these churches are hanging on by a thread, and that thread is we are right and everybody else is wrong. And we would sit in Sabbath school, and they would say again how we are right to almost nobody to nobody new in the church for 20 years. They would say we have the truth, and I don't know why everybody else doesn't get it, and they would feel good about it, and that would be the end of it. I'm just being honest with you, man. I was pastor of those churches.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely correct. I also pastored a church that way. I grew up in a church that way. um, I think that's absolutely true. I just think, and maybe this is back to Bjorn's question a little bit. This is maybe maybe some of y'all who have lived more life than I will laugh at this, but this is something I've learned at my old age of 33, that I didn't know at 23. I think that at 23, straight out of undergrad, I felt this burden to right the entire ship. I felt this burden like I needed to be the hero. I needed to change the whole thing. I needed to fix it. I had seen so many people harmed by church, and I wanted to fix it. And I think that over time, over the years, you realize, number one, you're not the main character. You realize that the ego dies a little bit with enough suffering, with enough pain, with enough hardship in life. And I think I think that at a certain point, I had to confront the fact that either I could remain angry or I could become the change I wanted to see in my tiny little corner of the world. And so when I talk to young theology majors who are super passionate and angry and upset, and they're like, well, I'm going to be sent to this church in the middle of the nowhere. It's like, yeah, man, you might be, and you probably will be. And that's probably true. But also, if you're angry about it, it's probably because you care. And that took me a really long time to accept that I was angry because I cared, and I felt hopeless because I cared so much. It wasn't that I didn't care, it's because I cared. And so my only answer thus far, and that's why I said to you, Bjorn, I don't really know if I know the answer, and the only thing I'm engaged in, I guess, that gives me hope is trying my best in my tiny corner of the world. And what gives me hope is other people, often not even pastors, people with a small group in their home, or just a group of people that meet at a coffee shop, or, whatever it may be, that gives me hope. So I don't know if that answers, but.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Anthony. I like talking today with Daniele, the guy that lives in Savona here, the AT reader. I mean, he said, we were talking about like what Adventist Today does, and how we're able to kind of think beyond the parameters a little bit. And he said, it's because of Adventists like you that I'm still an Adventist, and I'm sure he'd say the same about your ministry and what you guys are about. So it's just like, yeah, I'm passionate about kind of creating space for the thinking Adventist, the kind of the critical thinking type person, the skeptic. I've always been a skeptic, and so I just deeply appreciate what you do. Keep it up.
Thank you, my friend.
Dr. George Kitching, it's your turn.
Well, just George, please. Lauren. First, Bjorn, why don't you extend your running for 32 miles and go to San Rafael, a nice city after Monaco, and visit it? I lived there for 10 months since my birth and until 10 months of age, and then we moved. But yeah, you should do that, And actually, I was born there. Next Saturday will be 75 years since I was born in that town.
Woohoo! Congrats.
Oh yeah, but the mentality is very young still. Guys, you do a good job. You do a very good job, very necessary, and actually past due. I got 16 years of Adventist education, and in 1980, that was the blow up with Desmond Ford and all that. At that time, I had to restudy my theology. I had an undergraduate degree in theology, Adventist theology. But at that time, in 1980, I had to restudy everything. And my conclusion was simple. I could no longer support or subscribe to a church that had been deceiving people, deceived me and all that, with false doctrine, with problems with the plagiarism, with the prophet and all that. And so I changed the course of my understanding of the Bible and of the church. Now, and we didn't have internet at that time. We didn't have podcasts. We didn't have cell phones. We had nothing. You guys have everything. If we had that, those things would have been very different at that time, believe me. But now my curiosity is this: the facts that challenged my generation, they didn't change. The church did not change its position on all those issues that made that mess. It's the same. The official positions are the same. Question now is this: for the new generation like yours and the people that you interview, they are still younger. Are they aware of those facts, of those inconsistencies, incoherences, and all the problems? Doctrinal, like 1845 in the book of Hebrews, you cannot reconcile that, but the church keeps 1845 as a fact. Or a plagiarizing a prophet was a plagiarist, and many other issues, of course, that you know. How do your generation reconcile things? Is this generation totally unaware of the facts, so they just go with the flow? The church would like to hide everything, of course, if possible. Or if your generation is aware of it, how do you manage? How do you put things together? I don't know how you will do it, because I was not able to get the facts, get the reality, put it together. It just blew up. And so how do you approach? What do you listen from the generation, your generation? Are you fully aware? Or if you are, how do you handle it? Thank you.
Yeah, well,
John,
thanks for the question and the reflection. I think, it's hard to speak for a whole generation, but we can speak to the people we've both ministered to locally, whether it's in school or in churches, but also what we've done through the podcast. We just see a growing wave of more, openness to just exploring and looking at, the heart of what we believe in, and the challenges come along with that. So I think there is a lot of interest and openness to asking questions and going through and exploring things. But in the past, there's times where it's felt like there's fear to do so. So there's a mix of fear or just not having resources to explore those things. But that's changing very quickly, where you can go pretty much anywhere and look up different doctrines. And you can look up on YouTube plenty of people that go through and disagree, whether it's former Adventists or even those that stay within the church and have doubts or questions. There's lots of resources like that. So I think the conversation or the way of going about some of these things have changed over the past few years, maybe the past decade or so, because we have more information. And I think it's more about fostering good community, fostering good conversation within those disagreements or things. So even some of the things you mentioned about 1844, Ellen White and plagiarism, like even within our own team, Anthony, we have some disagreements, but people can't believe that whether it's religion or politics, things that Anthony and I, or with Jesse or Eric, our whole team, there's things we disagree on when it comes to those things. And we're still friends. We still get together. We're not just, I think what's made the podcast successful beyond just trying to follow God's leading is that we're all genuinely friends. And so I think that comes across in our conversations, that we love and respect each other. And we're trying to set that example for those that are listening, that we need to have more of that. We need to genuinely love and respect each other, even despite those differences. So I don't know if that answers everything. And I do need to apologize and just interject really quick for myself. I'm at I think for those that were here at the beginning, I'm at the beach with my church, and my wife is giving me the look of you're going past your time. So I do need to run, but I do want to say, and Anthony, you can mention this as well. I'd love to talk to any of you. You're all more than welcome to email us or reach out on Facebook, Instagram, and send us messages. We are always trying to have good conversations. And we just love to connect with you. We're trying to create community, whether you're Adventist or not, that just pursues the truth, pursues the Bible and what God is doing. So we're thankful for you. And just Lauren, thank you for having me and us on. And I wish I could stay a bit longer, but I do have to run.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Anthony, can you stay on for a little bit while we finish up some of the hands that we have
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, I'm okay to stay on
Great,
for a bit.
thank you. Sean, thank you for being here. Bob Johnston, your turn.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about doctrine. I'd like to think about culture. Every strong religion produces a distinct culture. Adventism produces a distinct culture, cuisine, lifestyle, all kinds of things. And it may be a surprise to some, but Adventist culture, particularly as it is generated around institutions, is rather attractive to some people. I know a person who calls himself a Seventh-day Atheist. He likes the cuisine, he likes the lifestyle, he likes the custom, he even likes the Sabbath school class discussions that he's in, but he doesn't believe in God. So my question is Adventist culture a plus or a negative? Not talking about doctrine, talking about culture.
That's an interesting question. I might perhaps pose a question to your question, which I guess would be, is American culture a plus or a negative? And maybe I just pose that question only to ask.
Well, the Adventist culture around our institutions is not always typical American.
That's very true.
So to answer the question about American culture doesn't help me.
That's fair. I think perhaps where my mind was going was, I don't know that culture is inherently negative or positive. I think that perhaps it just is. Perhaps it is what it is. I know that I have my personal opinions on it for sure.
Well, let's, instead of saying positive or negative, let's say attractive or unattractive.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I definitely think parts of Adventist culture are very attractive and compelling. I think the idea of taking care of the whole person, the whole body, I think that's a really compelling idea, really attractive idea, that we care about physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health. That's an Adventist conviction and belief. And then the idea of Sabbath, the idea of taking a moment to rest, to interrupt the day, to counteract, subvert the powers of Babylon in the world, of hurriedness and rush and worry and anxiety. So these are powerful, I think, ideas and cultural practices that we engage in. But definitely there's a shadow side as well. Like all of us, we have a shadow side to ourselves. Adventist culture, perhaps you could say, has a shadow side too. So I think perhaps a double-edged sword maybe is an answer that maybe I would give.
Yeah, what's nice, Anthony, is when the culture aligns with some strong spiritual values and strong spiritual experiences. And I think a Sabbath can do that. What happens so often that it is become my thought, Bob, is that so often the Sabbath has been used forcefully, bluntly, as an eschatological expectation rather than a blessing.
Yes.
That's just how I see it.
Yes.
Linda, your turn, if you would be so kind to. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for the program. I shared this early in my meeting with the group, probably, I don't know if it's been a year or more ago, that in my 12-step Alcoholics Anonymous AA group support, we read the same script, we read the same 12 steps, and this has been going on probably for over 50 years in the group. We have tools that's been in place for probably, that has changed very, very minutely over the past, probably over 50 years. It's over 50 years. And the reason why I'm citing this is because we come into the group at all levels. Some are court ordered, some from the insanity can recognize that we need help. Some just end up there because they don't want to go to jail. They don't want to go to an institution. But we all find ourselves in the same spot. And the thing that binds us together, we have people that are lawyers, doctors, homeless people, whatever, and myself. It binds us together because we're recovering from alcoholism. Now, we're at all different stages. We can get off the elevator. Our creed is the only desire to be part of the group is a desire to stop drinking. Not that you stop drinking, but a desire. We have people that are not even alcoholics that are part of the group because they have a desire. They don't want to drink and they have a desire. But the foundation for people like myself and others that are recovering from alcoholism is that the foundation is that we're recovering. And the tools, like I said, the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, the tools are there and you can pick them up at your leisure. It's a very personal thing, but it's a very binding thing because if we forget why we're there, why are we there? Are we there for whatever? We've had people to come in and try to change everything. We're there because I'm there because I'm recovering from alcoholism. When I forget that and I try to get on to other subjects, I mean, it's not wrong for me to get on another subject, but that got to be the remaining. And I'm saying this in a group that is mostly Christian because I have to come back to that. I'm a Christian, but my foundation is I am a sinner that needed salvation. And when I forget that Jesus Christ and his blood has redeemed me, and the tools, I use the Bible, I use prayer, scripture, whatever. When I forget that I'm a sinner and I need those basic foundations, then it's something is going to grab me and take me somewhere else. And then I'll start making excuses for to do certain things. The diet thing, I found people that are non-Adventists that will accept it more. I know that it has brought my A1C. I'm a pre-diabetic, and my doctor's trying to keep me from going to diabetes. I'm probably not even diabetic right now because eating a certain way, which our church advocates, and I don't even put it within the church. It's just the wonderful way of eating has brought my A1C down to a very good level that I'm not a diabetic, but I know, that eating this way is good. I use the tools that the church have taught me. I like the Sabbath, but I know there are other groups that keep the Sabbath. But I've kind of gravitated towards Seventh-day Adventist because I like a lot of the teaching. If you don't like it, like we say in Alcoholics Anonymous, keep what you need and throw the rest away. But it's very personal. But I know my foundation in this Christian walk is that I'm a sinner, and that my foundation is when I throw away Jesus and his redemption for me, and I'm just then it's something something with that. So I just
Linda, let's
thank you very much. Thank you very
let
much.
Anthony respond.
Yeah, Linda, thank you so much for sharing your experience. Really, really beautiful to hear how your faith has informed just your own personal recovery and healing. And it's incredible how faith can be such a foundational part of that. And I resonate with that. I also have a history of substance abuse in my life. So I resonate deeply. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you, Linda. Let's see. Eduardo, go ahead.
Lauren, I'm glad that I meet you at the GC session. You are very kind.
It was lovely to meet you,
person.
Eduardo. Thank you. Thank you for coming up and introducing yourself to me. Go ahead. Do you have a question or comment for Anthony?
Yes. At the GC level, there is a phrase that is around the leaders. The Desmond Ford got it wrong on the sanctuary, but he got it right on the gospel, which I completely disagree. If you see the the General Conference Committee newsletter, there is a picture of the annual council with close to 400 delegates, leaders of all over the world. I am in the middle of that picture. I recognize myself because I know me, but people might not recognize me. I've been attending the annual council, the spring meetings, and the GC session very regularly, almost every year. And I'm being chasing the leaders, and they run away from me. Actually, I get appointments and they don't grant it to me. So I recommend that we don't have nothing to lose if we think that we have the truth. No matter what the issue, we should be the people of the book. So my comment is that we need to, let me tell you a story. There is a pastor at the Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa, California. And so I make an appointment. I went to his office. And so I asked him why, if out of Jesus' mouth came 3 times the word Jews, why on the Sabbath he didn't mention the Sabbath is made for the Jews instead of men? And he said, oh, I have to go. I have to pick up my children from school. So I went back to his church to talk to him again. And he said, I don't want to talk to you about the things that we don't agree. And I said, but the things that we don't agree divide us. So we need to talk about our divisions, our personal understandings, and challenge each other. And if we are truth seekers, eventually we're going to be in agreement. What do you think, Anthony?
What I hear you asking is if we're all seeking the truth, depending, no matter what perspective we're coming from, that we should be able to do that together in the same direction, and that eventually perhaps the Spirit would lead us into all truth. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes, we're gonna fulfill the prayer of Jesus. We to be united on the truth.
I see. Yeah, I think I want to say what I think. I think what I hear you saying is that truth is what we should be seeking, and no matter who's seeking that truth, if they're a fellow truth seeker, then they're a part of our same family, and I think that that's absolutely the case. I don't want to misrepresent what you're saying, but that's essentially what I hear you saying, that you have this other pastor that you met with, and that we should all be able to seek the truth. I think it becomes a little complex when at times I think as Adventists we have a very narrow understanding of what constitutes truth, and we think truth boils down to just a few specific doctrines, rather than truth being way wider than that and way more infinite and expansive, just like God is. And so, not to say that those things that we claim as truth aren't truth, but just to say that maybe we could broaden our horizons a bit. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Thank you. I'm keeping an eye on the time here, and I want to get Courtney in. Yet before we go, Courtney, if you'd unmute, and we're keeping you long today, Anthony. Courtney, go ahead.
It's all good.
Hi, Anthony. Just wanting to give you kind of some encouragement. I am slightly older than you. And I will say that when you talked about the idea of wanting to be the change in the world and all this other kind of stuff, and feeling a little bit overwhelmed, as you came out of seminary, like really wanting to change the system, I will say that one of the things that is a blessing today, for pastors, that is different than even 10 years ago, is the fact that now there is so much of a network of people. Like, you're doing this podcast, right? Obviously, it's reaching so many people beyond your little neck of the woods in Texas. And the same thing that we can say about like so many other things that we can be connected by, that even before the pandemic we couldn't even really say that. So it, out of all the things that happened that were very devastating, the one thing that we have gotten as a benefit is an increased connectivity between us, so that we're not out here like prophets saying, Lord, I'm the only one. And God's like, no, I have 1,000 others who are just where you are. And so, places like Adventist A Today and Spectrum and Adventist Peace Fellowship and Just Love Collective and so many other, Conscience and Justice Council. There are so many other outlets of people who are like, hey, I want something different. I don't want this church to be stagnant, stay the same, and be exactly what it's been for, decades and decades. And there are lots of people who are connecting through those ways. So even if they might not get into the pews, at least they're still finding connection elsewhere, even if it's just virtually. So.
Yeah, thank you, Courtney, for that. That is encouraging, and I think you're absolutely correct. I think, and this actually touches on, George, your question. You had asked it a while ago, and Sean had to leave, and I haven't forgotten your question, George. You were asking about how does your generation think about those old things, and I think maybe this story sums up a piece of it. When I was around 22, 23, I had an older mentor pastor have a conversation with me. Well, I had a conversation with him because I was feeling very jaded and discouraged with the Adventist institution. I felt that I believed so deeply in the gospel, but the Adventist church, it seemed to be unaligned. And I I had a conversation with him about this, and he sat me down and he basically told me, welcome to the revolution. The Adventist Church has always been in tension with its own identity, and there have always been those on the side advocating for fundamentalism and those on the side advocating for the gospel since the very beginning. George Knight argues this in a lot of his books, like The Search for Identity, that the Adventist Church actually doesn't have a static identity, that it is still in an identity search. And so that actually gave me a ton of hope, the fact that I had that connection with him, because I saw an older person who was still a part of the institution, but was working within to be the change he wanted to see in the world. And so I think, according to your point, the fact that more than ever with the internet and post-COVID, a lot more people are online and connected, that it's like, wow, there are these little pockets, around the world where we're all sort of fighting the same fight for a better Adventism that could be, trying to so desperately to tap into what my friend Ty Gibson calls untapped potential of Adventism. So that tends to. So thank you, Courtney, for what you said, and I totally agree with you.
Thank you very much, Courtney. And one more question. This is from Fremen. If you would go ahead, and this will be our last question.
Thank you, Lon, for squeezing me in the last. I just want to thank you, Anthony, Jesse, Sean. It's a wonderful privilege to be invited to your table. It seems like it's a fly on the wall view of friends hanging around and having a discussion, much like I did in my younger days also. Things that caused much angst in us about the state of the church, maybe things that happened in my Sabbath schools, questions that were not answered the way I liked them to be explored and answered. But you guys give us that opportunity to to sneak in a view of something that you guys are doing, and I look forward to your discussions. I love the way you guys roast each other. I mean, I don't know if they are scripted or you plan to do it,
They're
but
not.
yeah, I mean, it gives us a real view into your friendship, the way y'all grew up, and it's delicious. Sometimes the questions that you raise are like so irreverent that gives me great delight to see that someone's into those spaces. Keep the work up. We are looking very we look very well, I look very look forward regularly for your podcasts on YouTube, and I mean it's just great.
Wow.
Thank you for keep up the good work.
Wow. Thank you so much, Prem. I really, I hope I said your name correct. Um, really appreciate your thoughts, and it's definitely not scripted. I can say that. It's funny actually. A little tidbit about Seeking What They Sought that many don't actually know is when we first set out, we recorded about 2 or 3 episodes that were highly scripted, highly curated, very NPR, very researched. We had like source lists and scripts, and we recorded them and we hated it. We absolutely hated it because it just was not us. Our friendship has always been organic and silly and, as you said, irreverent. And we've just, joked around, and sort of our humor and our spiritual side have always been intermingled and organic. So we did away with those episodes. They've never seen the light of day. And now we have what we have today. So thank you so much for following along and being part of our community. We appreciate it a lot.